In the year 334 BC, a young king decided to challenge the mighty Persian Empire. Alexander of Macedonia, just 22 years old, wanted to change the course of history. His first step led him to the banks of the Granicus, a seemingly insignificant river in Asia Minor. But this river would become the site of a bloody and decisive battle, a moment that would change the fate of the ancient world forever. Alexander marched with an army of 35,000 men. His soldiers were battle-hardened and disciplined, led by an elite cavalry, the Hetairoi, and supported by the feared Macedonian phalanx. But on the opposite bank waited the Persian army, 20,000 soldiers, including notorious cavalry troops and Greek mercenaries who were ready to stop Alexander's advance. The Persians had strategically fortified the riverbank. The Granicus was a natural barrier, and the Persians were convinced that no one could cross this barrier alive. Alexander decided to start the battle as the evening sun set over the river. He knew that the morale of his men depended on a quick victory. Without hesitation, he personally led his Hetairoi into the river, the spearhead of his army, but the Persians were ready. A hail of arrows rained down as the Macedonian riders crossed the water. Men and horses were swept away by the current while the Persian archers and spearmen held their positions. The first waves of Alexander's cavalry met the Persian riders, who fiercely pushed them back. It was a chaos of water, blood and metal. The river's current made it difficult for the Macedonian soldiers to raise their shields or wield their spears. Many were struck down in the floods before they reached the shore. But Alexander fought at the front. With his sword in hand, he rode into the thick of the battle, inspiring his men and managing to tear a gap in the Persian defense. The Hetairoi riders, trained in precise attacks, concentrated their force on the flanks of the Persian cavalry. The fight became increasingly brutal as more Macedonian units reached the shore. The decisive moment of the battle came when Alexander was personally attacked by a Persian commander. Mithridates, an experienced Persian warrior, recognized the young king and saw his chance. He raised his sword and charged towards Alexander. A single blow could have changed world history forever. But at the last second, Cletus the Black, one of Alexander's closest officers, jumped in. With a mighty blow, he killed Mithridates and saved Alexander's life. While the Hetairoi fought around their king, the Macedonian phalanx advanced. This massive formation of tightly packed soldiers, armed with 6-meter-long sarissas, moved like a living wall. It overran the Persian lines, crushed the defense, and drove the enemy to flee. The discipline and strength of the Macedonian infantry were overwhelming. The Persians, who initially seemed superior, began to retreat. The Greek mercenaries fighting for the Persians were the last to resist. Surrounded by the Macedonian army, they fought to the last man, but their fate was sealed. Alexander showed no mercy. He wanted to set an example and had the surviving mercenaries executed or enslaved. In the end, the battlefield was covered with corpses. The Granicus ran red with the blood of the fallen. Alexander, covered in blood but victorious, stood on a hill and looked at what he had accomplished. His men cheered, but Alexander knew this was just the beginning. The Persian satraps were defeated, and the road to Asia Minor was open to him. The Battle of Granicus was more than just a military victory. It was a symbol of Alexander's indomitable will and his vision to conquer the world. But this victory also came at a price. Hundreds of his men had given their lives to make this first step into an uncertain future possible. The world had received a message that day. Alexander was no ordinary king. He was a man willing to risk everything to shape history. But the question remains, what would have happened if Alexander had fallen at the Granicus? Would the Persian Empire have survived? Would Greek culture have ever conquered the world? We will never know these answers, but one thing is certain. At the Granicus, a dream was born. The dream of a man who wanted to change the world. Subscribe to the channel if you liked the video.